I have driven over 2 million miles in my life, 8 years behind the wheel of a semi-truck, crisscrossing the Great Plains, hauling freight through every kind of weather this part of the country can throw at you. Blizzards that whited out the world. Thunderstorms that turned the highways into rivers. Dust storms that blinded you and tornadoes that could flip a fully loaded 18-wheeler like a toy. I thought I had seen everything these roads had to offer. I thought I knew every highway and back road in a 5-state region, every truck stop and diner and small town that dots the endless landscape of the American heartland. I was wrong. There is a town that appears during severe weather warnings, a town that is not on any map, that does not exist when the skies are clear, that materializes on roads where no town should be. I found it during a tornado outbreak, 7 years after my brother disappeared in a storm, just like that one. I found him there, in that impossible town. And I learned what happens to the travelers who stay too long. My name is Owen Hartley, and I'm going to tell you about Sutter's Hollow. Not because I think you will believe me, most people do not, but because someday, during a severe weather warning, you might find yourself on a road that is not on your map, approaching lights that should not exist. And if that happens, you need to know the truth before it is too late. It started with my brother Caleb. Caleb was 3 years younger than me, 24 when he disappeared. He was driving home from college for spring break, taking the back roads because he liked the scenery, because he was never in a hurry, because that was just who Caleb was. A severe storm system moved through that night. Tornado warnings across 3 counties, the kind of weather that makes sensible people pull over and wait. Caleb was not always sensible. His car was found the next morning on a rural highway about 40 miles from home. The door was standing open. The engine was still running. His phone and wallet were on the passenger seat. No sign of Caleb anywhere. No footprints leading away from the vehicle. No evidence of an accident. No indication of what had happened to him. The search lasted 2 weeks. Hundreds of volunteers, police dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging. They found nothing. It was like Caleb had simply stepped out of his car and vanished into the storm. After 5 years, he was declared legally dead. My parents held a funeral with an empty casket, said their goodbyes, tried to find closure. I could not do it. I could not accept that my brother was gone without knowing what had happened to him. The not knowing was worse than grief, worse than loss, worse than anything I had ever experienced. I became obsessed with storms after that. I had been driving trucks for about a year when Caleb disappeared. After the search ended, I started volunteering for routes that would take me into bad weather. While other truckers pulled over and waited out the storms, I drove into them, scanning the highways and back roads for any sign of my brother. I told myself I was looking for Caleb, but I think part of me was looking for answers, looking for anything that might explain how a man could vanish from the middle of a road with no trace. Over the years, I heard stories from other truckers, stories about strange things seen during severe weather, lights in places where no lights should be, towns that appeared on roads and then were gone the next time you drove that route, people who swore they had stopped for gas or coffee in places that did not exist, that they could never find again. Most truckers dismissed these stories as exhaustion, hallucination. the tricks that tired minds play on long hauls through bad weather. But I listened. I paid attention. I wondered if somewhere in those stories might be an explanation for what happened to Caleb. It was a Friday night in early May when I found my answer. Tornado season was in full swing, and a major outbreak was developing across the region. I was at a truck stop outside Mercer, watching the storm clouds build on the horizon, when my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Tornado watch for 3 counties, expected to upgrade to warning within the hour. Other truckers were pulling their rigs into the lot, settling in to wait out the weather. Smart decision, the sensible decision. I watched them climb down from their cabs and head into the diner for coffee and pie, shaking their heads at the angry sky. I finished my own coffee and headed for my truck. "You are not going out in that," a driver named Pete called out to me. I had known Pete for years, had shared meals and stories at a dozen different truck stops. "I have done it before." "One of these days, your luck is going to run out, Owen." I just smiled and climbed into my cab. Pete was probably right. But I had a feeling about tonight, a sense that something was different, that the storm building on the horizon held something more than wind and rain and danger. I had been wrong about that feeling dozens of times before, but I was not wrong this time. I pulled out onto the highway as the first drops of rain began to fall. Within 20 minutes, the tornado watch had upgraded to a warning. Within 30, the storm had hit in full force. Rain fell so heavy I could barely see the road, my wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. Wind buffeted my truck, gusts that made the cab sway and shudder, that required constant correction to keep the rig moving straight. Lightning flashed every few seconds, illuminating the landscape in stark white bursts that left after images burning in my eyes. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. Tornado warning in effect for multiple counties. Seek shelter immediately. Multiple funnels reported. This was not a night to be on the roads. This was a night to be in a basement somewhere, waiting for the all clear. But I kept driving, slowly, carefully, eyes scanning the sides of the road for anything out of place. I had driven through storms like this before. I knew my truck, knew its limits, knew how to handle the wind and the rain. What I did not know was what I was looking for exactly. I just knew I would recognize it if I found it. About an hour into the drive, a flash of lightning revealed something blocking the road ahead. I slammed on my brakes and felt the truck slide on the wet pavement before coming to a stop. A tree had fallen across the highway, a massive oak that must have been 100 years old, its trunk too thick to push aside, its branches spreading across both lanes. I sat in my cab, rain pounding the windshield, and considered my options. I could wait for the storm to pass and hope someone came to clear the road. I could try to turn around and find another route. Or I could check my map for an alternate path. I pulled out my phone and studied the map. There was a county road about a mile back, Route 17, that appeared to connect to Highway 84 about 20 miles west. It would add time to my journey, but it would get me past the fallen tree. I turned around and found the turnoff. Route 17 was narrow and poorly maintained, barely 2 lanes, the kind of road that sees maybe a dozen vehicles a day. I had driven this region for years and did not remember this road at all. But maps do not lie, and the GPS showed it clearly, a thin line connecting the highway I had left to the highway I needed to reach. I drove slowly, rain still pounding, wipers still fighting. The road twisted and turned through farmland that looked abandoned, fields overgrown with weeds, no lights visible in any direction. This was empty country, the kind of place that made you feel like the last person on Earth. My GPS lost signal about 10 minutes in. The screen flickered, showed static, then went dark. My radio lost all stations, just white noise punctuated by the occasional emergency broadcast tone that cut through and then faded. I was driving blind now, following a road that might or might not lead where I needed to go. Then I saw the lights, not scattered farmhouse lights, not the distant glow of a town on the horizon. These lights were clustered, concentrated, close. A town, a real town, right there on Route 17, right there in the middle of what my map showed as empty farmland. I slowed down, squinting through the rain, certain I must be seeing things. A sign appeared in my headlights, weathered but legible, the kind of sign you see at the entrance to every small town in America. Welcome to Sutter's Hollow, population 847. I had never heard of Sutter's Hollow. In 8 years of driving these roads, I had never seen this town, never heard another trucker mention it, never noticed it on any map. But it was here, undeniably here, lights blazing against the storm, a refuge in the middle of nowhere. I pulled into the town slowly, not quite believing what I was seeing. It looked like a typical small town, the kind that dots the Great Plains by the hundreds. Main Street lined with brick buildings, a diner with a neon sign glowing in the rain, a hardware store, a pharmacy, a church with a white steeple rising against the dark sky. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light on rain-slicked pavement, and I could see cars parked along the curbs, people visible through the windows of the businesses. But something was strange about the weather here. Outside the town, the storm had been ferocious, wind and rain and lightning in full fury. Here, inside whatever boundary defined Sutter's Hollow, the rain fell gently, almost peacefully. The wind was barely a breeze. The thunder was a distant rumble, rather than a constant roar. It was like the town existed in its own pocket of calm within the chaos, sheltered from the storm that raged everywhere else. I parked my truck on Main Street and climbed down, needing to stretch my legs, needing to understand where I was. The air was cool and damp, but not cold. The rain misting rather than pouring. I stood on the sidewalk and looked around at this impossible town, this place that should not exist. The diner seemed to be the only business open at this hour. Through its windows, I could see people inside, eating, talking, going about their lives as if the storm outside was nothing to worry about. A normal scene in a normal small town, except nothing about this was normal. I pushed open the diner door and stepped inside. The warmth hit me first. The comfortable heat of a well-maintained building, such a contrast to the cold rain outside. The diner was classic small-town America. Booths with red vinyl seats along the windows, a long counter with chrome stools, a display case of pies near the register. The smell of coffee and grilled food filled the air. A dozen people were scattered around the room, various ages, various appearances, all turning to look at me when I entered. And they smiled. Every single one of them smiled at me, warm and welcoming, like I was a friend they had been expecting. A waitress approached, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and grey-streaked hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a uniform that looked like it might have been from the 1950s, but it was clean and pressed. Not a costume, just clothes. "Come in out of the storm, honey," she said. "You look like you could use some coffee." I took a seat at the counter, still looking around, still trying to make sense of where I was. The waitress poured me a cup of coffee without asking, set it in front of me with a little dish of creamers and a smile. "Thank you," I said. "I have to ask, where exactly am I? I do not remember this town being on my route." She laughed softly, a gentle sound with no mockery in it. "Sutter's Hollow has been here a long time, longer than most folks remember. I have been driving these roads for 8 years. I have never seen this place." "Well, you have found us now. That is what matters." I sipped my coffee, which was surprisingly good, and tried a different approach. "How do I get back to Highway 84 from here?" The waitress's smile flickered just slightly before settling back into place. "Oh, you cannot leave during the warning. Roads are not safe. Stay here until it passes. Everyone is welcome in Sutter's Hollow during a storm." "What do you mean, cannot leave?" She just smiled and moved down the counter to refill another customer's cup. I sat there, hands wrapped around my coffee, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Cannot leave during the warning. What kind of town told travelers they could not leave? An older man sitting a few stools down leaned toward me. He had a weathered face and white hair, dressed in work clothes that might have been from any decade of the past 50 years. "First time in Sutter's Hollow?" he asked. "Yes. I did not even know this place existed." The man nodded slowly. "Most folks do not. Not until they need to find it." He extended a hand. "Harold Dunn. Been in Sutter's Hollow for a while now." "Owen Hartley. How long is a while?" Harold's smile flickered the same way the waitress's had. "Hard to say. Time moves different here." Before I could ask what that meant, another customer called for the waitress, and the moment passed. I looked around the diner, really looked this time, trying to see what I had missed before. The people were all dressed differently, not just different styles, but different eras. The man in the booth by the window wore a suit that looked like something from the 1940s. A woman at a table near the back had her hair in a style I recognized from old photographs of my grandmother. A teenager near the door wore clothes that could have been from last year, modern and casual, and none of them were looking at phones. No one was checking the time. No one seemed aware of anything beyond this room, this moment, this endless cup of coffee. I finished my drink, left money on the counter, and went outside to look around. The rain had stopped entirely now, just a light mist hanging in the air. The streets were quiet, but not empty. People walked on sidewalks, looked in shop windows, sat on benches in front of buildings. They all nodded and smiled at me as I passed, friendly and welcoming in a way that felt almost rehearsed. I started noticing things that did not add up. The cars parked on the street were from different decades. A 1950s pickup truck, gleaming like it had just rolled off the lot, sat next to a 1980s sedan with wood paneling. A few spaces down was a car that looked brand new, a model from the current year. But they were all parked together, all maintained, all looking equally at home on this street. The shops had products in their windows that mixed eras. Vacuum tubes displayed next to smartphones, vinyl records stacked beside compact discs, a typewriter in one window, a laptop in another. As if time had blended together here, past and present existing side by side without any sense of contradiction. The fashions people wore confirmed it. A woman in a dress that would have been appropriate in the 1940s walked past a man in bell-bottom jeans from the 1970s. Teenagers in modern clothes talked with elderly folks dressed like they had stepped out of decades I had only seen in history books. Everyone seemed to accept this as normal. No one looked out of place because everyone was out of place. I walked to the church, drawn by something I could not name. The doors were open, warm light spilling out into the misty night. Inside, the pews were full of people sitting quietly, not praying exactly, just sitting together in peaceful silence. Candles burned on the altar, casting flickering shadows across the walls. A minister stood at the front, an old man in black robes with a face that seemed ancient and wise. He turned when I entered, and his smile was the warmest I had seen yet. "Welcome, traveler," he said. "You have found shelter from the storm. Please, join us." I walked partway down the aisle, drawn in despite my unease. What is this place? What is Sutter's Hollow? The minister stepped down from the altar, approaching me with slow, measured steps. Sutter's Hollow is a refuge, a place for those caught in the storm. We offer safety, peace, an end to fear. The people here, where did they come from? They came from the storms, like you. They found us when they needed us most. His smile never wavered. And they chose to stay. What if I do not want to stay? What if I want to leave? The minister tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. The warning is still in effect. When it lifts, you may leave if you wish, but I suspect you will not want to. No one ever wants to leave Sutter's Hollow. I left the church with more questions than answers and a growing sense of dread. The town was beautiful. The people were kind. Everything seemed designed for comfort and peace. But there was something wrong here. Something I could feel in my bones. Something that screamed at me to get back in my truck and drive away no matter what the waitress said about not being able to leave. I walked the streets of Sutter's Hollow for what felt like hours, trying to understand the place, trying to find some crack in its perfect facade. Every building was maintained, every lawn was trimmed, every window was clean. There were no abandoned lots, no boarded-up storefronts, no signs of decay or neglect. The town looked like it had been frozen in a moment of perfect small-town prosperity and preserved forever. I passed a barber shop where an old man was cutting a young man's hair, both of them chatting amiably about nothing. I passed a bookstore with volumes in the window that spanned a century of publishing. I passed a playground where children swung on swings and climbed on equipment, their laughter carrying through the misty air. Everything was normal, everything was pleasant, and nothing felt right. The people smiled at me constantly, not the forced smiles of customer service, but genuine warmth, real welcome. They wanted me to feel at home. They wanted me to stay. And that desire, that eager hospitality, was the most unsettling thing of all. I was walking down a side street, past houses with lit windows showing families inside, eating dinner and watching television, and doing all the ordinary things families do, when I saw someone that made me stop cold. A man about my age was walking on the opposite sidewalk, hands in his pockets, head down. Something about his posture, his gait, the way he moved, struck a chord of recognition so deep it took my breath away. He turned his head, and I saw his face clearly in the light from a nearby window. It was Caleb, my brother, 7 years missing, presumed dead, standing on a sidewalk in a town that should not exist, looking exactly the same as the last time I had seen him. Caleb? The name came out as barely a whisper. His head snapped up, eyes finding me across the street. His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like he had seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. We had both mourned each other in different ways, both believed the other was lost forever. Owen. His voice was the same. Everything about him was the same. The way he stood, the way he tilted his head, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was confused. 7 years had passed, and my brother had not changed at all. Owen, what are you doing here? I ran to him, crossing the street in a few quick strides, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except reaching him. I grabbed him, pulled him into an embrace, holding on like I was afraid he would disappear if I let go. He was solid, real, warm against the cool mist of the air. He smelled the same, that familiar scent of my little brother that I had not realized I remembered until this moment. Tears were streaming down my face, and I could not stop saying his name. Caleb, Caleb, oh God, Caleb, you're alive. You are here. He hugged me back, but there was tension in it, fear that I could feel in the stiffness of his body. When he pulled away, his eyes were wild. You should not be here, he said. How did you find this place? The storm, the road. I just drove and it was here. I was still gripping his arms, still afraid to let go. Where have you been? We searched for weeks. Mom and Dad thought you were dead. They had a funeral. Caleb's face crumpled at the mention of our parents. I know. I have been here. I have been here the whole time. For 7 years. You have been in this town for 7 years. He glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might be listening. Not exactly. It is complicated. We need to talk, but not here. Come with me. He led me to a quiet spot, a bench in a small park where the trees created shadows that felt almost private. We sat down, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. My little brother, unchanged, exactly as I remembered him. You have not aged, I said. You look exactly the same. I know. Caleb's voice was hollow. That is part of it. Part of what this place does. Tell me everything. Caleb took a deep breath and began to explain. Sutter's Hollow was not a real town, he said. Not in the way I understood the word. It was something else. Something that manifested during severe weather warnings. It appeared on roads, caught travelers who were looking for shelter, offered them safety from the storm. And then it kept them. The warning is the key, Caleb said. When the warning is in effect, people can come and go freely. Well, freely enough. The roads still lead in and out. But when the warning lifts, when the all clear is given, everything changes. What happens? Anyone still in Sutter's Hollow, when the warning ends, becomes part of it. Permanent residence. We cannot leave. We cannot age. We cannot die. He laughed bitterly. At least, we do not die of natural causes. I do not know what would happen if someone was actually hurt here. And between storms? Caleb's face went dark. Between storms, we do not exist. There is no consciousness, no awareness, no sense of time passing. It is like someone presses a pause button on reality. One moment the warning ends and the town fades. The next moment a new warning begins and we wake up again. 7 years for you, but for me, it has felt like maybe a few weeks, scattered weeks, separated by nothing. I tried to process what he was telling me. A town that only existed during severe weather warnings. A trap that closed when the all clear came. People frozen in time, pausing and unpausing like characters in a video game. How? I asked. How is any of this possible? I do not know. I do not think anyone here knows. The town just exists. It has always existed, as far as any of us can tell. Some of the people here have been trapped since the 1920s, since a massive tornado outbreak that tore through this region. They woke up thinking it was the next morning and found out decades had passed in the outside world. Why did you not try to leave during a warning? Why did you not escape? Caleb shook his head. I have tried, dozens of times. But once you become permanent, the town will not let you go. I can walk toward the edge, toward the boundary where Sutter's Hollow ends and the real world begins. But something pulls me back, not physically, but deeper, in my chest, in my core. An invisible force that says, I belong here now, that I cannot leave, that this is my home whether I want it to be or not. I grabbed his hand, holding tight. Then we will find another way. We will figure something out. I did not search for you for 7 years to lose you again. Caleb looked at me with tears in his eyes. Owen, you have to leave. You have to get out before the warning ends. If you get trapped here too, then no one will know what happened to either of us. At least if you escape, you can tell Mom and Dad. At least someone will know the truth. I am not leaving without you. You might not have a choice. We sat in silence for a moment, holding hands like we used to when we were children, scared of thunderstorms, seeking comfort in each other. The irony was not lost on me. Is there anyone here who understands how this works? I asked. Anyone who might know a way out? Caleb hesitated. There is one man, Vernon Keel. He has been in Sutter's Hollow longer than almost anyone since the 1930s by his reckoning. He claims to understand things about the town that no one else does. Most people think he is crazy, but some believe he has real knowledge. Take me to him. Vernon Keel lived on the edge of town, in a house that looked older than any other building in Sutter's Hollow. The paint was faded, the porch sagged, but there was a light in the window, and smoke curled from the chimney. Caleb knocked on the door, and after a long moment, it swung open. Vernon was ancient. That was my first impression. A wizened man who looked 100 years old, face carved with deep wrinkles, white hair thin and wispy, body bent and frail. But his eyes were sharp, bright, full of an intelligence that had not dimmed with age. "Caleb," he said, his voice creaking like old floorboards. "And someone new. Your brother, I assume. The resemblance is obvious." "You know why we are here," Caleb said. Vernon nodded slowly. "You want to know how to save him. Everyone wants to save someone. No one ever succeeds." "Then at least tell us why," I said. "Tell us what Sutter's Hollow really is." Vernon studied me for a long moment, then stepped back from the door. "Come in. I will make tea. This is not a conversation for doorsteps." His house was cluttered with decades of accumulated belongings, books and newspapers and objects from eras I could barely identify. Photographs on the walls showed people in clothing from different periods, faces that might have been Vernon himself at various ages, though they all looked slightly different in ways I could not pinpoint. We sat in a small parlor while Vernon made tea in a kitchen that looked like it had not been updated since the 1940s. When he returned with mismatched cups, he settled into a chair that seemed molded to his body and began to talk. "Sutter's Hollow exists because people need it to exist," he said. "That is the simple answer. And like all simple answers, it is true, but incomplete." "Need it how?" "The town manifests during storms because that is when people are most afraid, most desperate, most willing to accept shelter at any cost. Think about what it feels like to be caught in a tornado, or a hurricane, or a blizzard. The world is chaos. The world is danger. Every instinct screams for safety, for protection, for somewhere to hide." He sipped his tea, his ancient eyes distant, remembering. That need, that desperate wish for shelter, is what calls Sutter's Hollow into being. The town is not a place so much as a response to fear, to desperation, to the human need for safety in a dangerous world. It gives people exactly what they want most, and that is what makes it so effective as a trap. "But where does it come from? What is it really?" Vernon shrugged his bony shoulders. "I have spent 90 years trying to answer that question. 90 years of thinking and observing and wondering. I have theories, but no certainties. Perhaps Sutter's Hollow was once a real town that somehow became unmoored from reality, caught between existence and non-existence by some event we cannot understand. Perhaps it was always this, a refuge that exists only in moments of crisis, called into being by the collective need of frightened travelers. Perhaps it is something older and stranger than any of those explanations, something that has always existed in the spaces between the normal world, waiting for people to need it enough to find it. What matters is that it is a trap," Caleb said bitterly. "Yes, it is a trap, but not a malicious one, I think. The town does not hate us. It does not want to hurt us. It does not take pleasure in our captivity. It simply needs us. We are components, parts of the machine that keeps Sutter's Hollow alive and real. Without residents, the town could not manifest. Without us, there would be no one to welcome the travelers, to make the place feel real, to give it substance and warmth. We are not prisoners so much as we are ingredients, essential parts of the recipe that creates Sutter's Hollow." "So we are batteries," Caleb said. "Fuel for this thing." In a manner of speaking, I leaned forward. "Is there a way out? For the permanent residents, I mean. Is there any way to break free?" Vernon's eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Not hope exactly, but possibility. "There is a weakness," he said slowly. "The connection between a resident and the town is not unbreakable. It is maintained by acceptance, by the residents' own willingness to belong." Caleb made a frustrated sound. "I have never accepted this. I have never wanted to stay." "But you accepted when you first arrived," Vernon said. "You accepted when you felt relief at being safe from the storm. You accepted when you stopped fighting the wind and the rain and chose shelter over struggle. In that moment of acceptance, the bond was formed. That is not fair. Anyone would have done the same thing. Of course, that is why Sutter's Hollow catches so many travelers. The acceptance is natural, instinctive. Who would not feel relief at finding shelter during a tornado? But natural or not, it creates the bond. And once created, the bond is very difficult to break." "Difficult," I said, latching onto the word, "but not impossible." Vernon smiled, a thin expression on his weathered face. "Not impossible. There are stories, rumors, of people who escaped even after becoming permanent. People who found a way to reject the town completely, to sever the bond, and walk away." "How?" "The bond is maintained by choosing safety over struggle. To break it, you must reverse that choice. You must choose the struggle over the safety, choose the storm over the shelter, choose the danger that waits outside over the peace that exists within." I thought about what he was saying. "You mean Caleb has to walk into the storm, intentionally, willingly? Not just walk into it, choose it, embrace it, accept whatever consequences come from that choice, up to and including death. The town offers safety from death, and in exchange, it takes your life in a different way. To break free, you must accept death as a possibility, must value a real ending over an endless pause." Caleb had gone pale. "You are saying I have to be willing to die, actually die, torn apart by a tornado, struck by lightning, whatever the storm offers?" "I am saying you must be willing to face real danger rather than accept false safety. The town cannot keep what it cannot protect. If you truly reject its protection, you may be able to leave." "Has anyone actually done this?" Vernon was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know for certain. There are stories, as I said. People who walked into storms and never came back. Most assume they were killed. But perhaps some of them escaped, returned to the outside world, and simply never came back to Sutter's Hollow to tell us." "Why have you not tried?" I asked. Vernon smiled sadly. "Because I am old and tired, and the thought of walking into a tornado terrifies me more than the thought of existing here forever. Because I have made my peace with Sutter's Hollow, have accepted it as my home, and no longer have the strength to reject it." He looked at Caleb. "But you are young. You have family waiting for you. You have something to live for beyond these walls. If anyone can break free, it might be someone like you." We left Vernon's house and walked to the edge of town, to the boundary where Sutter's Hollow ended, and the storm still raged. It was a strange sight, that boundary. On one side, The peaceful streets of the town, mist hanging in the air, lights glowing warmly. On the other side, chaos. Wind howling, rain falling in sheets, lightning flashing across the sky. It was like standing at the edge of a bubble, calm on one side, fury on the other. "This is where I always fail," Caleb said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I can walk a few steps in, and then something yanks me back, like a leash I cannot see." "Try again," I said. "Maybe knowing why will help." Caleb took a deep breath and stepped toward the boundary. He crossed the invisible line, stepped into the rain, into the wind. 1 step, 2 steps, 5 steps. Then something yanked him backward. He stumbled, gasping, collapsing at the edge of the calm zone. I rushed to help him up, but he waved me off, frustration and despair written across his face. "It is no use. I cannot do it. The pull is too strong." I stood there, watching the storm rage beyond the boundary, thinking about what Vernon had said, choosing the storm over the shelter, rejecting protection completely. "Maybe walking out is not the same as choosing," I said slowly. Caleb looked up at me. "What do you mean?" "Walking out is still running away, still seeking safety somewhere else, just outside the town instead of inside it. You are not choosing the storm. You are trying to get past it." "What is the difference?" "The difference is..." I struggled to articulate what I was thinking. Choosing the storm means embracing the danger, wanting it, accepting that it might kill you and being okay with that, not running through it to get somewhere safe, but walking into it because you would rather face death honestly than avoid it dishonestly. Caleb stared at me, then at the boundary, then back at me. "You are saying I have to want to die. Not want to die, but accept it, really accept it, not as something to avoid, but as a possibility you are willing to face. The town protects you from death. Maybe the only way to reject the town is to reject that protection completely." Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was small. "I am terrified," he said. "I have spent 7 years in a kind of stasis, not living, but not dying either. The idea of actually dying, of stepping into that storm and being torn apart, is more frightening than anything I have ever faced. I know, but existing like this forever..." He trailed off, looking around at the peaceful streets, the welcoming lights, the trap disguised as a refuge. "That is worse, is it not? Being paused between storms for eternity, never truly alive, never truly dead. That is worse than any storm." "Yes," I said. "I think it is." Caleb stood up, brushing off his clothes, and looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not courage exactly, but resolve, determination. "I have to try," he said. "I have to really try." Before we could make another attempt, something changed in Sutter's Hollow. The lights flickered, the air pressure shifted. I saw people on the streets stop what they were doing and look up at the sky with expressions of anticipation. The minister from the church appeared, walking quickly toward us, his robes billowing behind him. "The warning is lifting," he said. "You must take shelter. The transition is beginning." "Transition?" I asked. "As the warning ends, the boundary between Sutter's Hollow and the outside world begins to close. Anyone inside when it closes becomes permanent. Anyone caught in between..." He shook his head. They do not survive the process. I felt the blood drain from my face. How much time do we have? Minutes, perhaps less. You must decide now, traveler. Stay with us in safety or flee into the dying storm. I looked at Caleb. He looked back at me. Go, he said. Owen, you have to go. One of us has to get out. One of us has to live. I am not leaving you again. You have to. If we both get trapped, no one will ever know what happened. At least, if you escape, you can tell Mom and Dad. At least someone will know the truth. His logic was sound. His reasoning was solid. And I did not care about any of it. I did not spend 7 years searching for you to leave you behind now, I said. We are getting out of here together or not at all. Owen! I grabbed his hand. We are doing this together, right now. Not walking through the storm to escape, but walking into it because we choose to. Because we would rather face whatever is out there than stay in here. Caleb stared at me, tears forming in his eyes. You would die for me. I would die with you. And hopefully, we will both live instead. The lights of Sutter's Hollow were dimming now, the buildings growing fainter, the whole town beginning to fade. Residents stood in the streets, watching us with expressions of sadness, pity, resignation. They had seen this before. They had watched other travelers try to flee and fail. The minister called after us as we ran toward the boundary. You cannot outrun what you have chosen. The town protects you. Outside is only death. We ignored him. We reached the edge of town, the place where calm met chaos, where safety met danger. The storm beyond had intensified, if anything. The tornado warning might be lifting somewhere, but here, in this moment, the weather was at its worst. Wind that could knock a man down, rain that fell like bullets, lightning that split the sky every few seconds. I stopped at the boundary and faced Caleb. You have to choose the storm, I said. Not escape it, not survive it. Choose it. Accept whatever happens. I am scared, he whispered. So am I. But I would rather lose you to a real storm than lose you to this place forever. And I would rather die with you out there than live forever in here. We looked at each other, brothers reunited in the worst possible circumstances, facing a choice no one should ever have to make. Caleb nodded. Together, we stepped into the storm. Not running, not fleeing, walking deliberately into the wind and rain and lightning. I held Caleb's hand tight, anchoring us together, and we walked into the chaos like we were walking into an embrace, like we were accepting whatever the storm wanted to give us, whether that was freedom or death or something in between. The storm hit us immediately. Rain that felt like needles, wind that tried to push us back, lightning that flashed so close I could feel the heat of it. This was not the gentle mist of Sutter's Hollow. This was real weather, dangerous weather, the kind of storm that killed people every year. I felt the pull immediately, something trying to hold me back, trying to keep me in the calm zone. It was not physical, not like hands grabbing at me, but it was real. A force that grabbed at my chest, at my very being, demanding that I return to safety, insisting that I belonged in the peaceful streets behind me. I ignored it. I kept walking. Caleb was struggling beside me. I could see it in his face, the pain of fighting against the bond that had held him for 7 years. Every step looked like agony, like he was walking through quicksand, like invisible chains were wrapped around his body, trying to drag him back. He was crying, tears mixing with rain, and his hand gripped mine so hard I could feel the bones grinding together. "Do not fight it," I shouted over the wind. "Accept it. Accept that we might die. Accept that this is our choice." Caleb closed his eyes. I watched him struggle, watched him war with himself, watched him try to do the impossible thing that Vernon had described. Not fighting the pull, but accepting the alternative, accepting death as a possibility, accepting the storm as his fate, if that was what it took to be free. I did the same. I stopped resisting the pull and started embracing the danger. I let myself feel the fear, the very real possibility that we might die out here, and I accepted it. I chose it. I told myself that dying in this storm, really dying, was better than the half-life that Sutter's Hollow offered. The pull weakened, not gone, but weaker. Caleb took another step, and another. His eyes were still closed, his face still twisted with effort, but he was moving forward. We were both moving forward. Behind us, Sutter's Hollow was fading. I could see it in my peripheral vision, the lights going out, the buildings becoming shadows, the whole town dissolving into the darkness of the storm. The residents were fading too, their faces the last thing visible, watching us with expressions I could not read. We kept walking, into the wind, into the rain, into the lightning. I do not know how long we walked. It felt like hours, felt like forever, felt like we were walking through the space between worlds. The storm battered us, soaked us, nearly knocked us down a dozen times. But we kept moving, kept choosing the chaos over the calm, kept accepting the danger over the safety. And then, somehow, the storm began to break. The rain lessened, the wind died. Dawn was coming, pale light on the eastern horizon, and we were standing in the middle of an empty field, soaking wet, shivering, alive. Caleb opened his eyes and looked around. The disbelief on his face matched what I was feeling. "We are out," he said. "We are actually out." I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight, laughing and crying at the same time. We had done it. We had escaped Sutter's Hollow. We had chosen the storm, and the storm had let us go. We walked until we found a road, a real road, Highway 84 stretching across the landscape, just where it was supposed to be. My truck was nowhere to be found, probably still parked in a town that no longer existed. But we were out. We were free. We were real again. A car came along eventually, stopped when the driver saw 2 men walking on the highway at dawn. He gave us a ride to the nearest town, a real town that would still be there tomorrow, and we began the long process of returning to the world. Explaining where Caleb had been for 7 years was complicated. He had no ID, no documentation, had been declared legally dead 2 years ago. There were forms to fill out, officials to convince, a bureaucratic nightmare that took months to navigate. But he was alive. He was back, and that was all that mattered. Our parents cried for a week straight, tears of joy, of confusion, of relief so profound it defied expression. They did not understand where Caleb had been or how he had returned. We tried to explain, tried to tell them about Sutter's Hollow, about the town that only exists during severe weather warnings. They did not believe us. They thought it was some kind of trauma response, a fantasy we had created to explain the unexplainable. Eventually, we stopped trying to convince them. It was enough that our family was whole again. But I knew the truth, and I knew that Sutter's Hollow was still out there. I started looking for evidence, searching through old newspapers, digging through archives, looking for any trace of the phantom town. I found nothing official, no records, no maps, no acknowledgement that the place had ever existed. But I found other things. Stories going back 100 years about people who disappeared during storms and reappeared years later, unable to explain where they had been. Accounts in local folklore about phantom towns that appeared during bad weather. Forums online where people shared encounters with places that should not exist, places they could never find again. The stories went back generations. Every major storm system produced new disappearances, new appearances. People vanished into severe weather and were never seen again. A few came back, years or decades later, confused and disoriented, telling stories that no one believed. I realized that Sutter's Hollow, or places like it, had been catching travelers for as long as severe weather had existed. Every tornado warning was an opportunity. Every hurricane, every blizzard, every violent storm. Somewhere in the chaos, a town would appear, offering shelter to those desperate enough to accept it. And the ones who stayed too long would become part of it forever. I decided to document what I had experienced, not for officials who would dismiss me, not for skeptics who would mock me, but for travelers, for truckers and drivers and anyone who might find themselves on a strange road during a severe weather warning. I wrote everything down: how to recognize Sutter's Hollow, what the people look like, what happens when the warning lifts, and most importantly, how to escape. You have to choose the storm, not fight through it, not run through it, but choose it. Accept the danger. Accept the possibility of death. Reject the safety that the town offers, not by fleeing it, but by embracing the alternative. I posted my account online, shared it with other truckers, sent it to forums where storm chasers gathered. Most people thought I was crazy, a fiction writer, a bored driver making up stories to pass the time. But some people reached out. People who had seen the lights during storms, people who had lost family members during severe weather and never found closure, people who had almost entered towns that should not exist and turned back at the last moment, saved by some instinct they could not explain. They shared their stories, and I collected them, building a picture of something larger than I had imagined. Sutter's Hollow was not the only phantom town. There were others scattered across the country, maybe across the world. Places that materialized during crises, caught travelers, kept them forever. Caleb struggled to readjust to normal life. 7 years of paused existence had left him disconnected from time, from routine, from the rhythm of ordinary days. He flinched during storms, had to leave the room when weather warnings were issued. Some nights, he woke up screaming, dreaming that he was back in the peaceful streets, feeling the pull that tried to keep him there. But slowly, day by day, he got better. He got a job, made friends, started building a life again. The trauma was still there, probably always would be, but he was learning to live with it. It has been a year now since I found Sutter's Hollow. A year since I drove into a tornado warning and found my brother in a town that should not exist. A year since we walked into the storm together and somehow made it out the other side. It is May again, tornado season. I'm sitting on the porch of my house with Caleb, watching storm clouds build on the horizon. The radio announces a tornado watch for 3 counties. Caleb tenses beside me. I see his hands grip the arms of his chair, see the fear flicker across his face before he controls it. "You okay?" I ask. "Yeah, just memories." I nod. I understand. I have my own memories of that night. My own nightmares about peaceful streets and fading lights. "Do you ever think about going back?" Caleb asks suddenly. The question surprises me. Going back to Sutter's Hollow. Not to stay, but to help. To stand at the boundary during storms and warn travelers before they enter. To try to save others the way you saved me. I have thought about it, more than I want to admit. Every time I hear about someone disappearing during a storm, every time I read about a car found abandoned on a highway with no sign of the driver, I wonder if they found Sutter's Hollow. I wonder if they are there right now, sitting in the diner, drinking coffee, not knowing that the warning is about to lift and trap them forever. I cannot, I say finally. The town would take me eventually. One day the warning would lift before I could get out, and I would become another resident, another component of the machine. The only way to fight Sutter's Hollow is to stay away from it. But people are still being taken. I know. We sit in silence, watching the storm build. Lightning flashes on the horizon. Thunder rumbles in the distance. I post the warnings, I say. I share the story wherever I can. Maybe it is not enough. Maybe I cannot save everyone. But maybe somewhere, someone will read what I wrote and remember it when they see lights on a road that should be empty. Maybe someone will turn around instead of driving in. Maybe someone will choose the storm over the shelter because they know what the shelter really costs. Caleb nods slowly. That is something, at least. It is all I can do. The storm rolls in as we sit there, wind picking up, first drops of rain beginning to fall. Somewhere out there, on roads we will never see, the lights of Sutter's Hollow are beginning to glow. Travelers are finding the town, walking into the diner, accepting the coffee and the warmth and the relief of shelter from the storm. Some of them will leave before the warning lifts. They will drive back out onto the highway and never think about the strange town again, not realizing how close they came to being trapped forever. Others will stay too long. They will become permanent residents, frozen in time, existing only during severe weather warnings, paused between storms for eternity. I cannot save them all. I know that. I have made my peace with it, but I can tell the truth. I can share what I know. I can hope that somewhere, somehow, my words will reach someone in time. If you are reading this and you find yourself on a strange road during a tornado warning, during a hurricane, during any severe weather event, be careful. Watch for lights that should not be there. Watch for towns that are not on your map. Watch for places that offer shelter from the storm. And if you find yourself in Sutter's Hollow, or any place like it, remember what I told you. Remember that the safety is a trap. Remember that the only way out is to choose the storm. Do not accept the shelter. Do not feel relief. Do not let the peace of the town seep into your bones. Choose the danger. Choose the chaos. Choose a real ending over an endless pause. That is the only way to escape. That is the only way to stay free. The storm is here now, rain lashing the windows, wind howling around the house. Caleb and I sit together and watch it. Brothers who survived something impossible, who escaped a trap that has held people for generations. Somewhere in the darkness, Sutter's Hollow is waiting. Somewhere, travelers are finding it. And somewhere, maybe, someone is reading these words and remembering them and making the choice that will save their life. That hope is all I have. That hope is all any of us have. And the storm rolls on, and somewhere in the night, the lights are glowing.